You got your product on the shelf and you got the funding, but you're still bleeding cash. This week, I'm joined by food and beverage strategist Debbie Wildrick, and we're talking about what happens when scaling outpaces structure. It's a classic business emergency. You look successful until you realize the engine's on fire. From logistics blind spots to forgotten shelf data, this one is a cautionary tale and a roadmap. Plus, I'll share details about the business continuity plan giveaway. It's the 1-year anniversary of this podcast, and I'm having a giveaway worth well over $5,000 for one of you. Let's dive in, shall we?
Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. Hey, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Business Emergency Room. I'm very excited you're here today because we are going to talk about an industry that many of us know something about from the consumer perspective. And we're going to talk about chaos and turmoil and how to navigate that all in the food and beverage industry. Because my guest today is the fabulous Debbie Wildrick. And she has over 3 decades experience running businesses across all verticals in the food and beverage industry, including a $4 billion business with 7-Eleven. So she's done both the brand side and the retailer side of things. And she now uses this to consult with companies that are not achieving the success and the performance that they're after. So yeah, similar space as I typically talk about, but the fabulous thing is that it's an industry that we think we understand or know something about. I think most of us. So I'm very excited you're here. Thanks for joining me, Debbie.
Thank you for having me.
I would say chaos in business is one of the most common things of all. So can you talk a little bit about what your experience is in finding businesses not where they want to be? Can you give us an example and how that led you to the toolkit that you use in your business now?
Sure. And I feel like the food and beverage industry, especially in early stage companies, but even very successful companies, is chaotic all the time. My career has been chaotic. And I can relate to one story in particular where we were building a water that was a source water out of Brazil that we were going to launch in the United States. And that required us to actually build our own contract manufacturing plant. And for the most part, many companies use co-packers, but we were building our plant in Brazil. And we had actually raised money in order to launch the company and buy the equipment and so on and so forth. The founder and the CEO was not able to understand how much it was going to cost him to produce the product. And what does that mean? I mean, first of all, you've got to understand how much team you need, the cost of running the equipment, the cost of certifications, the cost of daily production, and how much you can run, and what is the outcome, and all the cost of goods and the materials that are a part of that. If you can believe it, the CEO did not have that put together at all. And when he did have an engineer put together the work from Brazil, he came back with cost of goods that were about $4 a case higher than what he had told all the investors. And not only that, but I knew, because of the way that we determine what we need to sell the product at wholesale to the retailer community, I knew what was the maximum price that we could sell the cases to the to wholesale. And it happened to be $2 a case higher than the cost of goods, which was a profit margin of about 10 to 15%. Obviously, we exited the CEO, and that's the other thing that can happen, is that you're not really prepared when you're running a company. If you're not prepared, you're also very much in jeopardy of being exited to something that you actually founded. And so it's a big challenge. And that led me to one of the tools that I think is one of the most important, is a viable business model and determining where your business model is breaking down. And that's critical to business. And a business model starts with what retail prices you can command for your product, and then backing into the entire supply chain.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
yeah. Yeah. So you have a tool suite or a method that's called the 10 acumen, right? Where you talk about the levers or the 10 things that make or break the success of businesses. And safe to say there's lots of parallels to the stuff we talk about here all the time. I love this example because I don't think that that's one we've necessarily touched upon in that level. But yes, if I go into a business and go and check or do triage, right, and figure out how do we get back on track, where are you trying to go, and how do you make money, and does that setup make sense? And it's pretty fundamental if you're in the C-suite and you completely underestimated or didn't even do the work to begin with. That, yeah, I could imagine that's a break of trust that is that people are unable to overcome, right? That investors are unable to overcome. When we talked before, can you go a little bit more into what in that? If you look at the food and beverage industry, what is some of the ones that specifically seem to trip up things in the business model? What seem to be some of the processes that or parts of the chain that perpetually get underestimated?
Well, one of the big ones is transportation cost. And what we do as brands is we begin to build out our retailer community. Certainly we're probably selling e-commerce as well. And we're logistically trying to get smaller quantities to the retailer community. And if we've spread ourselves all around the nation as an example, but not necessarily created critical mass in our marketplaces. And so that's one of the biggest things that can happen, because you're still early enough in the brand, but yet you're shipping all around the country. You haven't created all the critical mass that you need to create by market. And that leads you to not even have full visibility over your transportation costs. Those are the first things that you really want to check, is all your costs of goods, your transportation costs. And then understand that you're making all the appropriate margins in every aspect of the supply chain. So that is one of the first things that you're going to do and try to figure out. But ultimately, as I mentioned right at the beginning, we're all about getting products into the consumer's hands and getting them into their hands over and over again. And so the other problems that come from your business model are not understanding whether or not you're increasing turns at retail. And and this is where many companies and many brands miss the boat. They can tell you what they've shipped to the back door, if you will, but they don't really manage their what we call scan data, which is what goes through the register and into the consumer's hands. And so not only have they had some issues along the way with their supply chain, but they don't really have an understanding of as to what they're moving into consumers' mouths. And without that, then we don't know what to really correct. Is it a messaging issue? Is it a packaging issue? Is it uh, changing your ingredients? Do we want to do any number of things? But without knowing that, and it happens all the time, without knowing that and understanding it, we can't fix it.
Yeah, and that to me is a problem I often see, particularly with startups that then get to scaling whatever it is they're producing, is that they're so busy getting the big contracts in place to get larger scale fabrication or to get stuff fabricated or transported to new market, that all the effort goes into okay, I need to get my stuff to this continent or this country. And then the assumption, I don't know if there is an assumption. Sometimes the assumption is that the local partner there will take care of the rest of things, but the process mapping very often stops there because the problem is too big, right? So they carved out a smaller problem, which is, let me get this piece fixed. And then that takes so much effort and energy that it's easy to slowly forget about what comes after. At one of the solutions I took with me from working in oil and gas is that on some of the major, more expensive and also safety involved operations, we would do the whole exercise on paper. And to me, that's what you can do with your whole business process, right? It's like, okay, cradle to grave. Where does this process start and where does my product all go and what are all the steps and who's all involved? Because it's easy when you're busy getting one thing fixed to forget about the next one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is how talking about the 10 pillars, it's really where every one of these pillars I need to look at when I'm digging into the business to figure it out. And a company that I just worked with a couple of years ago went out, and they were going through this the second time. The first time around, they went out, they got tons and tons of retailer distribution, shipped the product to the stores, got the product to the shelf, and thought that their job was done. And guess what? The retailers began to discontinue. Yeah, the product wasn't selling. The retailers began to discontinue. They didn't talk to the retailer about how it was moving, how it was going. They didn't talk to the retailer about promotional schedules and how do we move the product from the shelf to the consumer once again, and just left it. Oh, great. We sold all of this. And, a couple of years into it, the business began to just drop and drop and drop. So and actually when I came in to help them, we pretty much started over, right? Do you know when that happens, to start over again, those retailers don't forget. And so it's really a skill to figure out how to
make your second chance work.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love how you say that you need, when you come in, when you're invited in to help these people turn a business around or get to the success that they wanted, right? Stop the stall or unlock the stall, whatever we want to call it, that you say, well, I need to look at all of it. And that usually leads to, in my case, if it comes out the wrong way, that leads to hesitancy on the client side, because they're like, well, but you've already found a big thing here, so why don't we fix that? But the problem is that all these things are connected, right? And you want to make sure you don't want to work everything, because you can't. You can't work on all the 20 things that are maybe not fabulous. But you should be putting your energy on the things that will actually make a difference. And if you're fixing this here, but it has on the left, but it has a small tie to something that's dysfunctional on the right, and you don't know that, you might still not be fixing the problem long term, right? You might be window dressing.
Let's pause for a second, because what Debbie just said, that's the emergency most leaders miss. You're measuring, you're tracking, you're shipping, but you're still bleeding cash because there's no clear process to act on what you're learning. So there is stuff being done for the sake of being done, but it's not connected. That's not a growth issue. That's actually a typical business continuity problem. And if you're nodding along right now, you are exactly who I built this podcast for. To celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Business Emergency Room, I'm giving away over $5,000 value, a business continuity plan upgrade to one listener. You can all win this giveaway. And what I ask you to do is, in the podcast anniversary period, so between now and the end of July, go on LinkedIn or another relevant social media professional platform and post something about the podcast, comment on your favorite episode, or comment on any of the posts me or my guests have made, or reshare any of the posts around the podcast, or go wherever you're listening to your podcast right now and leave us a review or a comment. We will pick up all of those names and draw one lucky winner from there. Because we also want to reward all of you who are doing anything to help us grow this podcast, you will receive by email a checklist for your business continuity plan to actually take it beyond whatever is typically in there or what ChatGPT might help you create, to really look at making sure your business continuity plan is live and usable and not just another data set, as we were talking in today's episode. If you're interested in some personalized support to map your risk or pressure test your system and really get your business continuity plan to a level where it actually helps you when disaster strikes, take action now. Let's get back to the episode.
I talk a lot about the 10 items are everything, but if you can't, you mentioned this earlier, if the problem was dropping it off at retail and expecting it to leave the shelf, and you come back and say, but you're telling me that if I get more distribution, then I'm going to obviously build my sales that way. Yeah, you're fixing the symptom, not the cause, right? Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah, and that might be important, right? It might be important to at least get the fever down and get stuff to resale locations. But even if you would start measuring in store what's happening, if you then don't actually do anything with the data and process it and create a feedback loop that leads to then improvement, then you're just creating data, right? Yeah,
exactly. I can I can analyze the data really well. I can understand what's wrong, but do I know how to fix it?
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about asking for help? Because I talk a lot about that. As humans, we find it hard, right, to ask for real help. Yes, we would love somebody to do our dishes for us, but that's very different than actually asking something that feels more personal or that got something to do with our skills or capability. So can we talk about where do you get involved in the trajectory, and what do you see as some of the barriers with your clients for asking for help?
The barriers, I think one of the biggest ones, one of the barriers is they feel like they're doing things right. And if they just continue to not necessarily go the same way, but if they just continue to make sure, they've got a strong CFO who's managing spreadsheets and understands all the things that I've just been talking about, and so they don't really know how to ask for help because they're confident that they've got the right team, they've got the right players. They just see that things aren't going well, and I think that's the biggest barrier. And it the reference of the company that I was just talking about, it was the CFO who was one of the people that really truly had the experience in the business, who convinced management that they needed to bring an expert in, that it was time. And
Yeah.
that is, it just takes it internally, it just takes some convincing with regard to that, especially if they feel like they're doing things right.
Yeah, and if you compare it to a human body, it sometimes feels what we do to ourselves, right? I just need a few good nights of sleep, and I just need to get one or two things of my to-do list so I have some more capacity and I will be better. And you can do that for a long time, but at the same time, if you've been doing that for a long time, that's maybe a signal that you need a bigger intervention, right? And the challenge with a business is that at some point, yeah, a human runs into stress or burnout, but a business runs out of money, or your investors run out of patience because your business is not performing, right? And so admitting that maybe a fresh pair of eyes and some other expertise, because the value of turning around quicker or earlier is significant, right? If you can fix things quicker, faster, or better, I would imagine also very much in a business with smaller margins like retail, that makes all the difference. No?
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to another barrier too. I just had another company ask me for help, but the investor, who was very much discouraged because they were taking the business slow. That we want to make money, we want to make sure that we're still profitable, so we're just going to take this business slow. And it seemed, and the CEO was really against bringing somebody in because he was the one who wanted to just take the business slow. And the investor says, you know what, you've got to start scaling this business, otherwise the investors are no longer happy. They don't believe that they can even sell it. And so, big barrier when you have conflict within the organization as to supporting something like that.
Yeah, and then conflict or yes, it gets often brought up as conflict, but it originates from misalignment. It originates from misalignment on where the opportunity is and where the risks are. And in this case, how big a risk time to market or speed to market is in being successful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about decision making? Because that's one of my favorite subjects. Because I think when things grow and become more complex or get difficult or start to stall, that's one of the things where things are difficult too, right? So how does that translate in your framework?
So decision making, there's two different schools of thought, really, because decision making is difficult in working with a company that is having the kinds of conflicts that we just happen. And you have misalignment. I like the word that you used. And so there needs to be implemented a decision making process up front. We need to agree, me coming in as a consultant, okay, this is what we're going to review, and these are the steps that we'll take to make decisions. Can we all agree on how we do this? And so, establishing the problems, establishing the priority for fixing and how to fix them, and then presenting to the key players and getting alignment on we agree that we'll work through this based on the substantiation of the
Yeah.
review.
You talk about the fact that you come at it slightly differently, or a slightly different angle than I do, right? You don't talk about business emergencies. You say, okay, these are businesses with big aspirations, and they get underway and they get quite far, but at some point the growth of the process stalls, and that's where I come in. Is there what do you see, talking about a emergency room setup, right? What are some of the symptoms that you would say a business leader or an investor needs to look out for, to say, hey, I'm starting to see too much of this. This is no longer a little bit of an issue in a little bit of a growth spurt issue, and we can fix it internally. No, there is more at play, and we actually need a comprehensive review like you would offer to see where we're at and how we fix it. What are some of the symptoms that maybe trying to fix it in-house may no longer be feasible?
The first symptom is lack of experience. And believe it or not, you've got a lot of people running food and beverage companies that don't have experience in this business, and so they don't understand why I needed to. I got the product to the shelf. Why did I need to? And so the biggest symptom is really lack of experience, and so that.
So
really
everybody's a consumer, so everybody thinks they can run a business in food and beverage.
And everybody wants to wants to do it. And there's a lot of famous brands out there that have had people right out of college start their businesses, and others that of course were business people before, so and still having the same challenges. The other thing that is it's a symptom that is probably one of the biggest ones, is that regardless of what I'm doing, we've acquired new retailers, we've increased our distribution, we see turns at the shelf, but we're still bleeding cash.
You've tried enough yourself, right? You've tried the self-healing and the Dr. Google long enough. And it didn't make a difference. Yeah, giving yourself a deadline for how long you're going to figure it out with Dr. Google, and at which point you're going to actually go see a doctor, right? Might be.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, we all do that, right? We all, in our personal space, we do all the same things. So, yeah. Well, how, I would imagine that in the food and beverage space, because it's such a supply chain driven business, people are actually much less co-located, right? Things go over way more layers of people. Is that something that typically also leads to more different challenges? The fact that there's so many people involved in the business, but they're all work even for different organizations or in different parts, and are not actually close to each other, and may even change all the time. It may not even be a stable group of people who's involved. Do you see that leading to contributions to the challenges, or?
Yeah, because in this business, and let's talk about the sales team. And to run a business, you have to have operations running the back end, the building of the products. You have to have logistics running transportation. You have to have an accounting team who processes orders, but at the top is the sales team, and organizations can choose to hire their own team, or organizations, of course, can choose to hire what we call sales agents or food brokers. And speaking to the symptom, we don't recognize, as we begin to scale, we don't recognize what it takes from a team member perspective. And then even going back and making sure that your team is effective and that everybody is pulling their weight, if you will, through efficiency and making sure that you've got your infrastructure and your systems in place so that you can be effective. But, throughout teams, we're going to run into different types of people and different dynamics going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And what worked at this volume or at this scale may not work at this scale, right? And my experience with some of that is also that even if you are not outsourcing anything extra by going from this volume to this volume, right? In your direct organization, it's all the same people. You sometimes don't realize that it means that on the side of one of your most loyal partners, your transporter or somebody else or whatever, by going to an exponential different scale, they're going to ramp up people specifically for your contract at an insane rate. And so they suddenly have a much bigger team that's not as tuned in, that's not been the same people that you got that success with. And so the breakdown can happen somewhere else, even if you don't see the growth as a significant change, because it's happening somewhere else. The whole point of doing the kind of work we do is saying, okay, the reason that you end up in the situation you're in and that things are stalled or not progressing the way you want them to is because there's lots of little bits that have grown, arms and legs or dysfunctional or are starting to ache. And so if the solution was simple, you would know it, right? If there was a golden egg to get out of the situation, you and your teams would be doing it and you'd be fine. The reason that we're saying bring somebody in with a fresh pair of eyes and with a tool like yours to actually look at the situation and help you create a clearer picture again and say, hey, these are the hot buttons. Let's go after this. And we can get you back to a place where indeed you can self-manage totally, right? We don't need to stick around forever. And so, yeah. And I love that, to have somebody like you on who has that specialty in a very specific industry. So if people after hearing you here want to actually hear and see the comprehensive list of all the acumens that we talked about and or want to work with you or ask you more questions, where do they go and where do they find you?
So my website is debbiewildrick.com, and that's DebbieWildrick.com. And there you'll definitely find the 10 pillars. And also, if you do free.debbiewildrick.com, I have a download for you that is pillar number 1, which is market opportunity and consumer need, and it's an overview. So you'll get a little taste of what the 10 pillars are all about.
It's a little soft lead in somewhere between Dr. Google and getting the full Debbie.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I love that. That's great. Well, and Debbie, we will also have all these links in the show notes. So if that was a little fast, so your last name is Wildrick, but then in one word,
Yes.
Debbie. Yes. And I'm very glad you were here today. I enjoyed having you. I like specifically that you look at the whole business process and you focus on how a business makes money and use it as a tool to analyze where the pain points are. I often talk about the destination, which is not the same difference as I say. Sometimes we're so busy growing and scaling that we kind of forget, what we're there for and what we're trying to achieve, right? And it's the destination or is the setup saying, is that still doing what you actually will intend it to do at the end? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for reminding us that just because we think we know a business because we use it, doesn't mean we should all start a food and beverage company without help. And that the ones who are the ones who successfully started one out of school are probably unicorns and had some help from people like you along the way. No?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, thank you for tuning in today. I hope to have you back on the next episode, and maybe we'll learn about some other industries too. So, see you next time.
What I love about this conversation with Debbie is that it shows how quiet a business emergency can really be. There's no alarms or no headlines, just a team slowly losing clarity, the disconnections getting bigger and bigger, a model that's no longer working, and a leader clearly unsure where to start. If you recognize any of this in your own business, remember, now is the time to act. Not only can I help you with your business continuity planning in general, but I have a special giveaway going on due to the 1-year anniversary of my podcasts. So it's worth over $5,000 and is an upgrade of your current business continuity plan beyond the practical standard content, really making all that extra stuff works that makes a difference when business emergencies occur. So, taking action just means you need to share something about this podcast by means of a review or anywhere online on a relevant business social network like LinkedIn. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being part of this wild and necessary ride. Talk soon.
That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.